The pasuk says in the beginning of parshas pekudey that Moshe Rabbeinu gives a great accounting of all the gold that was given. Says that all the gold that was given was Tesha ve'esrim kikor. What is that in English? 29 talents. I guess somebody's missing some talent over here. Ushva meos u'shloshim shekel v'shekel ha'kodesh. And 730 shekalim. Okay? But you know what's lacking? After he gives the amount of gold that was given, he doesn't elaborate how much of the gold was given for each particular piece of gold that was used in the Mishkan. When it came to the copper and the silver, it said the amount of copper and silver were given, and then 100 of silver was given for this piece, 45 was for this piece, and such and such, and by the copper too. By the gold, it mentions the amount of gold that was given, but it doesn't give a whole cheshbon about each particular piece, how much gold was for this piece, how much gold was for that piece, for the sockets, for the question. It doesn't do any of that. Very simple. What is the difference? How come by the gold it does not give the exact accounting, but by the silver and the copper it does give an exact accounting? Maybe as follows. It's a fascinating medrash. Why Moshe Rabbeinu made the audit in the first place. The medrash explains that there were three types of people. When Moshe would go out into the tent, all the people rose up and stood, every man at his tent, and gazed after Moshe.
Vehibitu.
Very good, Tzvi. So the first group of people, they said, how fortunate is the human to have such a close relationship with Hashem? This group didn't suspect him at all. The second group suspected him of taking from the donations. All right, it's just stealing. That's how he became rich. And the third group was like a compromise. Well, he took, but he's allowed to take because that's how he supported himself. He undertook the massive responsibility of building the Mishkan. I mean, B'Tzalel actually physically built it, but Moshe was the chief. What's the word we're looking for? Contractor. So when Moshe heard all this, he insisted to give the counting of everything he made. Another thing to keep in mind: the Das HaKenim says that the gold, silver, and copper represent the three types of givers. Gold represents the people who give when they were healthy. They don't want anything in return. They're purely giving lishma. They gave because they believe in the cause. Silver represents those that give when they're sick, hoping that in return for giving, they'll be healed from their illness. And the copper represents those that give only after death. In other words, they don't want to be affected negatively by the giving. Now, these three categories of people are represented in the gold, silver, and copper, and they also represent how they think about themselves vis-a-vis how they suspect Moshe Rabbeinu. The Gemara tells us, Kol HaPosel, someone who suspects another of wrongdoing is basing his suspicion on what he himself would do in that situation. So based on this, we can understand the three groups of givers, and we can understand the difference between the gold, the silver, and the copper, and why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't feel the need to give such an accounting by the gold. The group that gave the gold looked up to Moshe, didn't suspect him of any wrongdoing, so he didn't have to be so elaborate in the calculations. He said what was given, that they shouldn't suspect him of taking anything, but to explain, really, you gave this amount. Really? Explain what you did with all that amount. Maybe you took some for yourself. The goal, he didn't need to do that. The group that gave the copper is the group that suspected Moshe of stealing because they cannot understand doing something without taking something in return. So they said he must have stolen because they were stealers. They were robbers. The group that gave the silver understood, well, there is some element of giving. It's not purely altruistic. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't work hard for the Mishkan, but he should be compensated because they also felt that they wouldn't do anything unless they got something out of it. So now we understand why the Torah didn't account for how the gold and silver was used. Because the silver and the copper came from those without complete altruism. And they suspected Moshe. The gold came from those that believed in the cause. And they trusted Moshe. Therefore, they never suspected him of taking anything of it. And therefore, he didn't feel to be so elaborate in his calculations. And Shabbat Shalom.